Hello, and thank you all for joining. My name is John, and I am going to be your guide today on this webinar, which is designed all about gap year planning and the college deferral process. Again, I want to just make a couple notes. Feel free to use the chat or the Q&A as a way to communicate with us, anything you want us to expand upon or any specific questions that you have for myself or any of my guests here. I'm going to try to make this timely so that I can get to everything. So I'll do my best to answer the questions as I see fit. So I also want to thank you all for your time being here this evening. We are deep in the college decision process right now. It's a stressful time to be a senior, or some of you may be juniors or and are starting to approach that college process right now, which if that case, you're in a great spot as well. So this workshop is really designed to break down what a gap year is and discuss how it fits in alongside your college planning. We're going to walk through what a gap year is, why you might take one, what you can actually do during your gap year, and how that gap year planning actually nicely settles in right into your senior year timeline. So, and then afterwards, we'll dive into a conversation with two of our very special guests, Christian and Camey. So to begin, I want to give somewhat of an introduction, some context for you all on myself. A few things to know about me. I too was in your shoes pretty recently. In fact, I actually am an EF gap year alum. Now I get to work with students and families like you every single day, helping them figure out whether a gap year is right for them. I'm also on the board of the Gap Year Association as their alumni ambassador. So if it's not clear enough, I was immensely impacted by my GAP program and really believe in the transformative abilities of gap years. So we're fortunate enough also to have Christian Meyer here joining us this evening. Christian, do you mind coming off mute and just giving us a quick intro of who you are and the experience you're bringing into this conversation tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everybody. My name is Christian. I help run our EF Study Abroad organization. So at EF, our gap year team and our study abroad team, which hopefully is the next chapter of your global education journey. Once you are in college, for those of you who choose to go that route, would pick up in the part of EF that I work in. So I run around the country at college and universities like Duke with Camey and others, where we partner and build study abroad programs. I have 4 sons, all in and around college age. So 2 just graduated, one's still in high school, coming at this window of time, just like you are. Have been at EF for almost 10 years, but have a lot of perspective from partnering with so many colleges and seeing so many of them around the country, and also have kids that are have gone through this same window of time, some of who selected to do a gap year, some haven't, and excited to talk about it with you.
Christian, thank you for that, and excited to kind of peek into some of your insights you hear for us this evening. With that said, I'm also super grateful to have Camey joining us here tonight. As you all know, we are in the midst of college decisions, and for Camey to make time for this webinar, just amazing. So Camey, come off mute, and can you share us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Camey VanSant, and I'm Senior Assistant Director at Duke Undergraduate Admissions. And as part of my role, I oversee all gap years for Duke, and particularly our Duke Gap Year program, where we offer the possibility of community and also some financial support to Duke students, admitted students who are taking a year off between high school and their Duke careers.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Camey. So before we dive into our conversation between Camey, myself, and Christian, I want to also set the scene of where we're at in GAP and the college decision-making process. And also I want to share you a bit of context on who we are here at EF. So just to answer the first question that I always get, EF stands for Education First. And EF is the world leader in educational travel. And for about 60 years now, we have sent millions of people all across the world, whether that is to just see new places, learn new languages, or just discover new things about the world and about themselves. You may actually know us already because we work with your high school, and maybe you've traveled with EF Tours or EF Explore America. We like to call ourselves actually globally local. We have over 52,000 EF staff located in 114 countries all across the world. And I'm saying all this only because it results in us ending up with a really unique perspective where we can actually see firsthand and at a massive scale the shifting education landscape right in front of us. And so ultimately, more and more students are following these untraditional paths with the desire to learn about the world, about themselves, and about themselves in the world. And this is exactly where gap years come in. So I also want to let you know that there are a lot of misconceptions about what a gap year is, and there can be a lot of things that can be considered a gap year. When it comes to us, we're very focused on a very defined lane. Our gap years are intentional, focused, and centered around personal growth. They are a stepping stone for really whatever might be next for you, whether that's college, a job, etc. And so here at EF Gap Year, we work with all sorts of students who are looking to take a gap, whether that be taking a gap right after you graduate high school and before college, like I did myself, or maybe you're in the middle of your college journey and looking to take some time off to recharge or redirect, or students who want to take a gap year or gap time post-college before they enter the workforce. So we also see students who maybe feel that college maybe just isn't for them and they want to pursue something else entirely. So a gap can really be a great option there as well. So if you have any sort of inkling that you might want to take a gap, but you aren't sure it's the right fit, or if you want to take a gap but don't know how to make it happen, or if you're waiting to hear back from a college or have heard back from a college and a gap is on your radar, you're in the right place. This webinar really walks through the gap planning journey, especially for those of you who are still in high school and starting to think about college. The similar info is also helpful for anyone who might be on this call who is already in college or in a different position as well. A lot of gap planning can still apply to you. So here is the thing about gap years. It's actually a much simpler process than you might think. There are really three main paths. So path one is that you apply to college as you normally would during your senior year, then defer your acceptance and enroll in a gap program. Path two is maybe you commit to a gap year and use your year as a time to maybe research and reapply to colleges. Or maybe path three, which is sort of like a combination where you apply to colleges during your senior year, and then you choose to either defer or reapply during your gap year. And having worked on this team for quite a while now, and I even took a gap year myself, like I said, I know that the single biggest problem that students run into is that they don't start planning early enough. It's so important to start planning now, and it's helpful that a gap planning process really mirrors the college planning process. To start with, you really need to sit down and start thinking about what your options are, what your goals, what your dreams are. We need to be thinking about what you want to get out of this experience. So I want to actually zoom into path one and take a look at the senior year timeline. So senior year can be and is overwhelming. And again, really the goal of this webinar is to just show you how manageable the gap year planning process is. In fact, we actually have a full gap planning roadmap on our website that helps you navigate this process. And I remember the nerves and excitement of senior year so well, and there are a lot of emotions to balance within that. But it's also a chance for you to take the reins. And there are so many exciting things to look forward to. So I'm showing you this timeline. You probably know it all too well. Essentially, you start your fall researching colleges and working with your college counselor, get your college apps in order. And then from there, you officially apply to schools and then start to hear back in the spring, like around right now. And then by May 1st, you enroll in the college of your choice. And what you'll see is that gap planning really fits in alongside right in that same timeline. So there's a big misconception that you don't touch anything gap related until May after college planning. But just like any big decision, when you leave it to the last minute, it can become stressful and just hard to pull off. So you really can use your year to better understand if a gap program is a right fit for you. And I think this timeline can be particularly great info for juniors to keep in mind, because as you approach this summer and the fall, as you're researching college options, I want you to also take a look at the colleges that you're looking into. Maybe search up gap year on their website and start to understand their gap year policies and their deferral process at these different schools. And we'll speak all about that later in this webinar as well. But in the meantime, I want you to start to think about what you want out of your gap year how you want it to look, and just research different gap programs that interest you. And then hopefully by December time, you'll be working with an EF gap year consultant to narrow down and really hone in on the programs that interest you. And then as we continue through this timeline, you'll apply to those colleges the same as you always would that you're interested in. You'll hear back in April, and then May 1st is college decision day. And that's when you'll want to start that deferment for your college enrollment to start the following fall. So as you probably can imagine, this is not an overnight decision. You deserve the time to think through this and find the best next step. And for those of you who are seniors on the call, I want you to know as well that you are still in the right place. You have time to think through and hear back from your schools. But the main date we'll want you to keep in mind is that May 1st college decision day, as you'll need to defer around that time. So as you begin to research those gap options, I think it's also important to remember that there is no typical gap student and no one reason to take a gap year. I personally took a gap year because I really wanted to learn a new language, but you can see some of the most common reasons pulled here. And as this chart shows, pretty much all of the influences surround personal growth and learning in various areas of their life, like gaining life experiences and growing personally, traveling and experience other cultures, or just taking a break from the academic track. So whether you identify as one or many of these types of students, I think there's one thing that really encapsulates all gap year students, and that is that you are curious and willing to think outside of the box. And our main goal is to prepare you for success in that process as well. And you probably don't have all the answers yet, and you probably shouldn't. Here are some of our students on their gap programs all over the world in some incredible places. And all of this started from having a focused conversation and discussion around questions like, what am I curious to learn about, and where could I learn it? Do I want to learn or practice a language? How much structure or support do I need? Or simply something as like, are there places in the world that I've always wanted to go to? So what it really comes down to is goal setting and early planning. Asking yourself these questions is truly how you can make the most of this productive year. And within that conversation as well, we know that every student has a unique plan, has unique goals, and there are lots of details that need to be ironed out. And so that's where we step in. We are gap year consultants. And really the first step in this process is to connect with one of us, whether that's over the phone or over Zoom. And we work to have a conversation with you that outlines those goals, those interests and motivations. And we work to outline a program that fits those desires. And then we work to finalize those program details and make sure you have any specific needs covered. So when it comes to EF gap year in particular, we have a bunch of different program options that range from gap semesters to credit-bearing semesters and the full gap year program. And just for the sake of time, we don't have all the time to walk through every single different option. So I just wanted to show you the full gap year as an example of what you could do during your gap. And really quickly, you can see the gap year is actually divided into 2 academic semesters. You have your first semester that starts in the fall. Then we send and fly all of our students back home for winter break, and then the second semester. And as comparing the semesters, you can see it's a pretty dynamic and packed itinerary for the first semester, 3 different continents in the span of 12 weeks. And that was intentionally set because it gives you the opportunity to explore a wide range of different cultures and communities and engage in different excursions and projects. And then for your second semester, you really have the chance to take what you learned in that first semester and then apply it for a culturally immersive experience. You can see the following options where you can spend the second half of your gap year, which is 11 weeks. So at this point right now, let's say you've decided you're going to take a gap. Well, what do you do next? So now you need to defer your college acceptance. So what even is a deferral? To defer your college acceptance means to postpone your enrollment, opting to start college a semester or year later. And students choose to defer for a variety of reasons, most typically to take a gap program. And here's kind of an outline on the gap deferral process. More and more universities are adopting a formal policy around deferrals as more students are requesting them. Almost all colleges have formal systems in place that will allow students to hold their spots at the college for a year while you take a gap year. And again, it ranges from school to school. Some evaluate the requests on a rolling basis. Others might have deadlines where the range might be between May 1st and August 1st. So definitely keep an eye on that and the schools that you're looking into. Also, a main part of the deferral request can be a deferral letter as well, which the deferral letter should explain what you plan to do on your gap year, why that time is important for you, and what you're looking to get out of it, and how it will make you an even better student and community member at that school. And we actually created a sample deferral letter template that our gap year consultants would be happy to share with you after this webinar. And most colleges actually really do support students taking gap years and researching the different gap policies of the schools that you're interested in, and combined with a solid deferral letter will result in very high chances of your deferral request being granted. But if for any reason the deferral request is not granted, again, unlikely, speak to your gap year consultant about our deferral guarantee. This guarantee allows you to book without worry. If your deferral request is rejected, you will have the option to cancel your gap year and receive a refund. I actually want to bring in this quick quote from Diego. He actually is a gap year student who deferred, and Diego says, through his gap year experience, he realized that fashion is his career and what he wants to do. And taking a gap year with EF helped him to get into his dream college, Parsons School of Design, after actually getting rejected the first time around. So Diego, it was pretty cool. He utilized and leveraged the experiences on his gap year to reapply to the same school that rejected him, and he got in. So ultimately, gap years in 2024 are really built as a gateway to success in college and beyond. And not only are gap year experiences beneficial for students, but they also benefit colleges. And we're really going to dig into that more with Christian and Camey tonight. We know that students enter college more confident, more adaptable, and better prepared for success than their peers who maybe go directly into college from high school. And maybe I'll stop there because I think this is the perfect transition to our conversation with Christian and Camey. So if Christian and Camey, if you guys can both come back on camera. I want to also say to everyone in the audience, hopefully you're feeling a little bit more confident in making your gap happen. And again, we're here to support you through every step of that process. There are so many things I want to touch on in this conversation, and also want to highlight our amazing guests here. So Christian, I think I'm going to start with you. You have 4 sons who have went through and are going through this college process. I want you to actually internally rewind the clock a bit and think about that time and that college process. And I'm just curious to hear what you would share to parents actively going through this.
Thanks, John. My experience now, both parents and your sons and daughters, everybody on the phone, I think the biggest challenge is that everybody sort of steps on this conveyor belt, right? The momentum of your classmates or a momentum of the other parents hanging around on the side of the soccer field, like this engine just, is going, right? Your high school, college, orientation night, everything has momentum. I think for my kids, their biggest concern was like stepping out what they perceived as out of cycle. They're going to step out of the rhythm with their friends. And that was worrisome for them. And so, I think that is what my experience was, sort of the biggest rhythm to sort of break out of and have the courage to break out of it. I think now where I am on the other side of of probably this experience in college, I've got one more going through it, but sort of in my job, just talking to so many schools. There are 4,000 colleges and universities in the US. Probably, all of us on this call could, put our heads together and name 50 of them. There are amazing sort of educational experiences out there. Personally, I will say, I'm in conversations on the side of the soccer field, and other parents are like, "Hey, Christian, you're almost an empty nester. You're getting close. Like, what are you going to do with this time?" And I'm like, "God, I don't know." And then they ask, "Well, what do you love to do?" And that one bothers me because that one's like, I don't know. Like, I haven't I don't know. And like for my advice for my kids, and I give the same advice here, if I could ratchet all the way back and grab this moment of time to really explore myself, explore the world, explore sort of different dimensions of the world, be confronted with different cultures and different norms. I think that is life changing, which is why I do what I do, which is I'm sure why Camey does what she does, and we're all here. And I think there was the guy who's the head researcher on leadership studies has this quote. He says, great leadership is powered by simply understanding yourself. It's both that easy and that hard. And I think that one sits with me because this moment of time before you step into college, before you step into this heavy investment in yourself, to do that self-exploration it's something I covet now, 30 years later. It's something I really sort of push and covet with the boys. And like the European teenagers, your European counterparts, like all do this. They do it either before college or after college. They think the Americans are crazy. They just don't understand why American teenagers like run into the conveyor belt and leap on it and sort of hug it and just go straight through college and out the other side into a job without grabbing this window. So, I think those are my quick reflections, and it's really exciting to be here and talk to you. I know it's a moment that just has a lot. It feels like there's a lot going on, for sure.
And that's super powerful. And there's so much of that I feel like I just want to dive into a little bit more. One in particular that I'm curious to hear Camey's side on is you mentioned the piece on, the great pieces of leadership, knowing yourself. And I think there's a beauty to knowing yourself and also being uncomfortable with not knowing yourself yet and exploring that. And Camey, so the question I want to ask you is, in terms of students who take gap years at Duke, how do you see them return to campus? What's kind of their engagement with campus like?
Yeah, so one of the really fun things that I get to do is host occasional events with our gap year community which are, composed of Duke students who took gap years before they started at Duke. And they're really just such like amazing, interesting people. They've had all sorts of cool experiences. They've traveled all over the world. Some of them have pursued arts for an entire year. We had a student who went around to chess tournaments and became a chess master. And they're just such a diverse, really interesting, really engaging group of people to talk to. And one theme that tends to come up a lot is that their gap year was a time where they could really learn independence. Like they're structuring their own time. They're not just going from class to sports practice or band or to another club, then going home to do homework and getting up and doing it all over again. They're having to think in many cases about how they want to use their time, what's important to them, how they're gonna, do their laundry, even basic things like that. And that really helps them transition to college, where you're spending a lot less time actually in the classroom. You're having to make new friends in many cases, explore new locations, and there's study abroad opportunities, all of these things. And those skills that they've honed during their gap year really, I think, put them in a great position to benefit from the whole college experience.
I love that, Camey. And I think what's interesting on that note as well, and also in my own experience, and I also what kind of tie this into what Christian said in terms of mitigating that empty nest of feeling. Really, students at 18, maybe the hidden secret that we all want to know is no one ever really knows what they want to do. And so having the intentionality to feel confident pursuing an interest that stands out to you is super inspiring, I think, to a lot of people, and allows them to rediscover new passions within themselves. Maybe some people in the audience here can relate, thought I wanted to pursue one track when I was 17, going into high school and never really being exposed to much out in the world. Went on my gap year and really was faced head on with it and completely shifted paths, which is something that I found so much joy and passion and excitement in. And so I think that is pretty interesting, just comparing some of the students who might have done something like that and the students who haven't. And I think on that note, Christian, I want to rope you back in terms of kind of your experience that you've seen within your professional career, specifically within the decade working with EF in terms of higher education as a whole. And do you see any trends that have been starting to stand out in terms of how colleges are approaching stuff like this as a whole?
I think colleges, just like Camey and Duke are looking and embracing these experiences because they are after students that are going to sort of, help them maintain or improve their own reputation. So they are looking for students that are going to graduate, that are, going to have be sort of academically successful. They're looking for students that are going to participate on campus and take advantage of everything that the campus has to offer because that is really highly correlated with your sort of allegiance to that institution after you graduate. And so they have started to see global education in any dimension, um, as really kind of an important driver of their own success, of campus life, of the dimensions of student life on campus. Right now, John, as you know, we are at EF are sort of working on taking the study abroad experiences, so the sort of in college global ed experiences, and pushing them forward more and more to freshman and sophomore year so that they are earlier, because the data says the correlation between you having all these experiences and doing well on campus and having higher academic trajectory and being sort of more dynamic participants in the university landscape, having better academic performance, just like Cammy said, that's all highly correlated. So schools are really looking for this. I think another dimension is that sort of during COVID, many schools started doing away with standardized testing. Many schools, started trying to figure out better ways to run their admissions process. But now what you hear is kind of everybody walks in the door with solid grades or good grades. The way to differentiate students for the university is actually getting harder. So these experiences that allow you to sort of walk in the door proving, um, really proving inclusivity and open-mindedness and interpersonal bravery, because you've been in all these other contexts and you've confronted all these other sort of parts of the world on your own, and the independence that we highlighted is really attractive, and it's something tangible that the schools can look at and correlate with those skill sets that I think is really is powerful. And you hear, just like you heard from Cammy, you hear that pretty consistently.
And I believe in that also firsthand, having experience, doing that deferral process, going into college. Maybe some students here can relate to the sentiment I'm about to share in terms of maybe feeling like a decent student overall, but maybe not super engaged into your own coursework and academics. And actually, myself personally, taking a gap year that didn't have an academic focus tied to it, I returned to college so much more eager and appreciative of just the privilege of education as a whole, and found myself way more into my books. And that actually wasn't even something I was looking to get out of my gap, just kind of naturally happened from the exposure, taking a break from it. So just I think what's interesting on that is, some of the skills you talked about and people that return to campus. And I guess I'll lean into that one more time in terms of like, maybe there is the academic component where people might feel reinvigorated. Do you see any sort of improvement or a way students differentiate themselves personally in terms of the SCAP experience?
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead, Kimmy.
oh no, please go ahead.
No, you go first. I just talked.
Oh, well, I mean, I think I don't have data on people's GPAs or anything like that, but I do think that, especially in recent years, people tend to, or many people feel a lot of burnout after high school. And it's really understandable because the college admissions process for many people is extremely stressful. In many cases, people have to apply to a large variety of schools while managing a lot of academics, a lot of extracurricular activities. And so to have some time between high school and college where you can really turn your attention to something else. Maybe you really love dance, but you haven't been able to spend as much time on it as you wanted to because you are also doing school newspaper and on a sports team and taking AP courses. Or maybe you've always wanted to learn a new language, but it wasn't offered at your school. You had to fulfill your school's foreign language requirement, but that wasn't the foreign language that excited you. Or there's a large variety of reasons to just sort of step away from a very extremely structured high school environment to do something completely different. And then when you come back to school, you sort of have more energy to devote to that. And also, like I said, you've gained some skills that help you take advantage of the college experience as a whole. And so, you know, whether that's just engaging with a diverse community or gaining independence, like I said, or, you know, being able to advocate for yourself or feel confident that you can overcome challenges. All of those things are super important for succeeding as a first year student. And that's something that a lot of gap year students are able to already sort of take on before even coming on campus.
I think that's great to hear. And I think on that note, I'm curious to even hear like internally. I mean, I love hearing your sentiment on you know, how Duke kind of you know, enables this opportunity for its students. But is there any internal dialogue? I mean, you're sharing a lot of it on the Duke side of things and how they see their students. You mentioned some pieces on the formal process on how you even request a deferral at Duke. Can you briefly speak about that process and like maybe let the audience here know about that?
Yes. So for us, if you choose Duke, our decisions are going out tomorrow. So I hope we're fortunate to be able to give good news to many people. But if you choose Duke by May 1st, as soon as you choose Duke, there is an opportunity to request a deferral. And we ask you what you plan to do on your deferral. If you apply to the Duke Gap Year program and you wish to request funding, we request a sort of budget. And then we decide whether to accept or deny your gap year request. We accept the overwhelming majority of gap year requests because of a lot of the ideas that you have, which is that gap year students are often people that really add to the community. So there is a process of review, and I'm happy always to talk to people about it. But in general, we're very generous in granting gap year requests as long as students sort of agree to our gap year conditions, which involve you know, continuing to uphold the Duke Community Standard and a few other things. And then we are usually able to get back to you within 2 or 3 weeks, and we can often rush that request. Our deadline for the Duke Gap Year program, which is if you'd like to request funding or just sort of want to be part of the Gap Year community, is in late May. But often people request gap years after that, kind of on a case-by-case basis.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's great just hearing like a formal understanding of like what that looks like at Duke. I know my own personal experience with deferral. I actually just gave a quick phone call to the admissions officer at my university and told them I wanted to defer a semester, and they approved it. And that's actually how simple it really was. And I had such a daunting view on like what that was going to feel like. And I remember being nervous even approaching that conversation, and then was so relieved to just hear their own my university's own kind of stance and policy within that. On that note, on maybe students who might feel like me, might feel scared or like not sure how to think about a gap, Christian, I kind of want to point it back to you in terms of the skills, maybe hard or soft, in terms that students might have might tap into in taking some time off and doing an intentional gap program.
Sure. I was interested. So there was just a big study abroad conference in Boston, and I hosted a panel with a recruiter from the Boston Red Sox, a talent manager from UPS, and an executive coach and education designer at a business school in Europe. Talking about, let me go all the way to the other end of what employers are seeing as skill gaps in talent, in young talent, specifically college graduates that are sort of walking in their doors. And it was interesting, like what they talked about was 100% about empathy, communication skills, adaptability, resilience. They are in, you know, as I'm sure the parents on the call know, we're all working in rapidly changing environments. Companies are dealing with increasingly global markets and fast change, just fast change, period. So what one of them said was, discipline, diligence, and obedience are commodities, meaning that they're just easy to get. And passion, creativity, and resilience were really what they were looking for. So if you go all the way to the other side of college, to sort of just imagine yourself interviewing for your next job, and also sort of in this process of college, like these skills, they labeled as durable skills. They called perishable skills, computer science, like that, that sort of things that we think are going to power sort of really accelerated careers. They're like, listen, that will power your career for 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 years, but like it's going to change. They highlighted that the people that are going to live to be 120 are born already. So in these kinds of careers, like this learner mentality and like these durable skills of, communication, curiosity, critical thinking, adaptability, empathy are the ones that I think everybody is looking for, because those are the skills we're all going to lean on for our whole lives. And on the panel, I had the executive coach who's doing sort of development for, CEOs and people like that. It is literally all the same stuff. Like they are literally talking deep in my own career, like about those skills. And so if you ratchet it all the way back to this moment, to gap year, and to be able to go into what I view as literally a school for this semester that is just got a different shape to it, but that is teaching like these skills like head on, is it's just super smart. Like I don't even know any other way to say it. I mean, certainly people will make this decision or not make a decision, but uh it's really compelling. You will walk out of these experiences armed with tangible ways to point to these skill sets that you'll rely on for, college and your career and the rest of your career.
I feel so strongly just about like what a gap year experience can look like and feel like. And I think regardless, I speak to gap year alumni all the time who have done programs vastly different than my own. But for some reason, there is always still a common thread that can still connect us. Even though I did my program primarily in Italy, learning Italian, someone probably spent their program in Thailand, helping to with elephant conservation. Despite all the differences within that, we still find a way to connect regardless of those experiences. And Camey, that's where I want to hear your experience on what that like niche gap year community looks like at Duke, because for some students, they might have fears on, not graduating with their same high school, or not entering college with their same high school senior class, and thoughts on that. But do you see like what that gap year community still looks like even after they return from their year off?
Yeah, so that's been sort of one of the most fun things I've done. The Duke Gap Year program is pretty new. It's about 5 years old, but several of those years were COVID. So we're kind of seeing their first quote unquote normal years. And what we've done on campus is kind of have a series of gatherings. Like we had an ice cream party for people about to start their first year the day before move-in. And then we had a study break during fall exams for all gap year current students who did gap years, and we had a dinner for first years. And it's really, I found that a lot what you've said, that like even if these people didn't know each other through other means, like they always have things to talk about. And like I've seen like random friendships form amongst gap year people. And like remember a couple people met at our study break last year, and then I was in a campus dining place and like saw them sitting together, and I was like, oh, like they've connected over their gap year, even though one was an engineer and one was not. And I think they were in different, I think one was a sophomore and one was a freshman, and they did totally different things in their gap year. But just sort of having that experience and being a sort of curious person who cares a lot about learning about different cultures and expanding their horizons can kind of unite people. So I think it's a really fun group of people to know. And I'm super excited for our admitted students programs in April, where we're going to have some like gap year interest dinners. So it'll be a fun way, I hope, to unite people who are thinking about gap years who had just been admitted, and some current students who are sort of on the other side of their gap year.
I love that. And this is also
Yeah.
me inviting myself to the next ice cream party because that seems pretty cool. I think
There was
I'll
an ice cream truck. It was really cool, actually.
that seems
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So I think obviously like we hear so much on like you know, what gap year students look like and how they return to campus. Christian, maybe you can tap into the energy of you know, your four sons and like maybe what their attitudes could look like, even approaching such a new and maybe scary idea for what could be, you know, maybe a lot of students in this current phase of their life in this current generation. Do you have any thoughts on like what they probably are expecting or thinking or worrying about?
Well, I mean, I think there's definitely you know, I don't want to speak for anybody, but I mean, I experienced with my sons you know, fear or reluctance to break out and do sort of take their own path. I think one thing that is amazing about our gap programs, and I just see it happen in the study abroad ecosystem, is the sort of cohort model where the sort of you are with a group and you are bound together within the structure of our program. So you meet each other, you form lifetime friendships. You know, there are certainly gap experiences that are individual, and there's study abroad experiences that are individual. Um, and I think, you know, those are great for the right kind of student, but you know, I think part of what we feel strongly about in the learning design of our own programs is that working within a group actually is a key skill builder, excuse me, of, you know, the adaptability and the negotiation and the sort of authenticity and the you know, ability to work in a team. Like you get to sort of point to all these things and you learn all these things, um, that I think that is really important, you know, and I think, you know, my kids have all had either study abroad experiences or gap experiences, and, you know, still point to all of them as the most memorable chapters of their sort of educational journey.
I think it's fascinating to hear that, and also, you know, tapping back into my own uh, sentiment when I was a high school senior, comparing all my friends who, you know, I was the only one really in my neighborhood, my own social circle who did something like this. And that feeling can be exciting, but also, you know, that comparison can be a little scary, just as I was seeing all my you know, peers go out to college and have that syllabus week and they were all having fun. And then, you know, I still was back at home. And I just want to tell everyone in the audience here that those feelings quickly dissipated after you know, syllabus week ends after a week. And then I was in Italy, you know, exploring the culture and the cuisine, and that just felt incredible. And I think those feelings, I quickly was able to stop that comparison, to understand, okay, what I'm doing is pretty cool right now, and you know, that's their journey, this is mine. And so on that note, I also want to recognize that I haven't done a good job of answering some questions that people have written in the chat. Taking a quick look here, I see one that I think can be pointed towards Camey's way in terms of, does deferring enrollment for Duke ever affect like eligibility or aid?
So most students who take a gap year do have to reapply for financial aid during their gap year if they wish to. We have our overwhelming majority of our financial support is need-based. And if you're a US citizen, permanent resident, or eligible non-citizen, we continue to meet 100% of your demonstrated need. So that's the package you would get when you're, you know, applying to Duke and you receive your admission letter and your financial aid award letter together. You'd apply again, and again, we continue that guarantee of meeting 100% of demonstrated need. In terms of merit scholarships, in general, we have very few merit scholarships, but they do allow students to take a gap year and continue to have the merit scholarship. But that's always something I would just say, I'm only speaking for Duke, and you should always talk to your college about how financial aid would work, whether it's need-based financial aid or merit-based financial aid for gap year students. But, you know, like I said, our financial aid guarantee for continues to sort of apply after students take a gap year as well.
Appreciate that insight, Cammy.
Yeah.
And also, I see a question here about financial assistance and what that looks like in terms of the gap year and the semester programs offered by EF. So EF actually has their own merit scholarships that we award to our own gap students. There also are a number of scholarships that external gap year providers also provide for students looking to do gap years. One that comes to mind is the Gap Year Association. You can go on their website, click on that financial aid tab, and then you can see a whole list of scholarships that they offer to students for any program, to apply for any program. In that sense. And Camey, on that note, again, in terms of Duke, and let's say if I were to check that box that I want to defer a gap year, would that affect like my enrollment, or would that affect my eligibility to be a Duke student that next fall?
No, so we hold your place at Duke for the following year's class, provided you follow our sort of gap year conditions, which are things, like I said, that you continue to adhere to the Duke community standard, that you're not applying to other colleges or universities as a degree seeking student. You can see all of these. They're not very many. But I think that's one of the really exciting parts of the gap year, is that you apply to Duke, you're admitted to Duke, you choose Duke, and you're able to have an entire year that you can explore other things, learn differently, or go other places, whatever it is you want to do. And then you kind of know what is on the other side of it. And that's not something that's offered in most parts of life, like I can't just say, well, I think, next year I will travel to Italy and learn Italian and like do what you do. Because I wouldn't necessarily have a job on the other side. I have not asked, but in many cases, like adult people can't just go exploring and then know that something really good is on the other end of it. And so that's one thing that is really exciting about being able to hold spaces for students. And at Duke, we're going to send them invitations to our gap year students, invitations to the admitted student program. They're invited to webinars for admitted students. So even as they're off on their gap year, they're still keeping up with like all their latest information and things like that. So they can be prepared to fill out their housing applications and register for classes and all that while having all their adventures.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Camey. I also see another question asked by Nanella in terms of, has EF reached out to other colleges? We actually do have partnerships with other universities here at EF Gap Year and Study Abroad, specifically that have intentional credit bearing semesters. And I think, Christian, this is a great time to highlight maybe some of the work that you're doing across the country, really, and in terms of the colleges that you're partnering with, and some notes you can say on that.
Yeah, sure. So, so in study abroad, out of the 4,000 colleges that I mentioned, we partner with probably, 400 to 500 of them in any sort of 2-year window. So we see a lot. We understand and have relationships with so many colleges, and also sort of international colleges. When we create study abroad programs, we sort of have the other side of the ocean or the world where you might be sort of taking classes at an international college or university. So we also have a lot of relationships with those institutions, which are also amazing. And in the structure of a gap program, I saw a question here of like, can I do this without applying to college? Absolutely. And John, I'll let you take that one. But the European universities are super eager to catch gap students that might come to Barcelona or the rest of the world and then want to apply to the University of Barcelona or Queen Mary in London. Like, we partner with schools that are so excited to get American students. So if you haven't put that into your sort of thinking, that's a whole other fabric of education that is really exciting, amazing experiences. Unlike the US, a semester at the University of Barcelona is probably $7,000 right there, or a year actually. So it's also just a really affordable solution.
Appreciate that insight, Christian. Thank you for that. I guess I'll tap into that question in terms of, can someone do a gap year without being accepted to college yet? The answer is wholeheartedly yes. And we have many students who are in that phase. That was one I mentioned that example of Diego. He was a perfect example. If he actually got rejected from university and hadn't, he didn't accept any admission from any university that he was applying to. So he went into his gap year not having a plan, essentially, of or not having an automatic university that he was entering into matriculation the following fall, but use that time as an opportunity to leverage his experiences, his stories, what he's learned, the insight that he's garnered to then apply for college. And I think maybe that could also be a transition into a question that was asked maybe towards Camey's way on like, how does Duke view students who maybe haven't applied yet to Duke, but have taken a gap year and then utilize that in their resume? Camey, do you have any notes that you can mention on that?
Yes, so we certainly accept applications from students who are on a gap year when they're applying. And I think the way we look at it is the same way we look at really any experience, which is, how can the student articulate why that experience was important to them, what they gained from that experience, and how the experience can contribute to them being an outstanding member of our community. So I wouldn't say that like there's an advantage to taking a gap year, but if that's something that means something to you and it's something that you can learn from, then there might be really interesting things that you can share on your application, in your alumni interview, that can help the committee kind of understand who you would be on campus.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Camey. See, a quick question that was asked in terms of the dates and the deadlines for current high school seniors applying to EF gap year programs. How soon would we have to apply? And I would like to answer that by saying we are a rolling admissions organization. So we do keep enrolling students up until our programs hit capacity. So with that being said, I mentioned a big component of this is getting started early. Typically, we work with students around 6 to 9 months before they depart on their gap year. That is like the healthy range of time, or that is enough time for us to figure out a program that excites you, is interesting, and then work to grant you enrollment in one of our programs. So that's kind of how that process works. Again, no strict deadlines. Obviously, you can't enroll in a program the day before it departs. There are some technical things in that end, but typically we work with students and families about 6 to 9 months before. And I see a question asked by George in terms of how does an EF gap program differ from a traditional study abroad experience during college? And I think that's a perfect question to maybe ask your way, Christian, if you can speak on the things that you've seen there.
I think if you imagine sort of a pie chart, the gap experiences are sort of designed to expose you to as much as possible, both, in terms of self-discovery in yourself, but in terms of different sort of international environments, different ways of learning, language learning, internships. There's a big body of time that we can dedicate to all of those sort of exploration dimensions. In study abroad, the big chunk that sort of comes in to compete with all of that is actually taking your courses at an international university. So the study abroad experiences are all 4 credits. So you're taking a semester of college abroad. And so the sort of competition that sort of comes in there from a time perspective is the 4 to 5 courses that you're taking during that semester at any of those international university partnerships that we just talked about. And you're taking an EF, sort of what we call a foundation course, which is really focused on sort of self-leadership and communication skills.
Thanks for that, Christian. I also can speak on kind of how we see that in GAP in terms of the like gap year study abroad first semester programs, where we actually partner with some universities and their professors to construct curriculum and itineraries that reflect the experiences that you're going to have abroad. So it's not like you're going to have a traditional just the same 4 walls of the classroom that you would have had in the United States. Now you're in Spain. It doesn't really look like that. It's much more immersive in terms of appreciating the environment that you are in. We really want to take advantage of that as well. So I think at this note, I'm going to let some other answers trickle in. But I think maybe some closing statements from both of you could be helpful for any advice that you might have for high school seniors thinking through college right now. Camey, maybe I'll start with you and then I'll end it with Christian.
Sure. So I think as we're sort of in the midst of decision season, I think the most important thing to think about for both colleges and for gap year is to do what is best for you and your family. There is, and I think John, you referred to this, there is often a lot of pressure to do whatever you want to say to people, or what seems like what everyone else is doing, or whatever you want to, post on social media. But ultimately, you need to do what is important to you and that sort of is meaningful and in accordance with your values. And if the best part of whatever you're doing is that you're going to post that you're going to do it and not that you're actually doing it, then that is a problem. Okay. So if a gap year is something that you want to do, then there's all sorts of resources for you to explore it, even if it's different from what other people that you know or in your community are doing. And likewise, on the other hand, if you decide that it's not the right thing for you, that's totally fine too. There are many other opportunities, as we've heard today, to go abroad later on. So it's a lot of time, and I know you don't have a lot of time right now particularly, but it's just important to step back and think and talk to your family about, what is it that you want to do, and how can you pursue that in a reasonable way, and not sort of just get caught up in like wanting to say various things or do what other people are doing. So that I would say both for your college choice and for your decision on taking a gap year sort of is the best advice I have. And also, ask. So there's all kinds of people out there at colleges, and people who are kind of making their careers in this general sphere, like, are doing it because they care about these things, right? So reach out to them and ask questions. If you're not sure what your college's gap year policy is and you can't understand the website, ask, right? You don't want to find that out later. If you're kind of weighing different gap year opportunities, ask people who know about those opportunities. This is sort of your chance to learn more. And I think I speak for almost all of us, and I hope all of us, in saying that, well, everyone here clearly, but overall in this field, that we want to help students be successful and be excited about what they're doing. So never hesitate to reach out about any details.
Love that, Camey. Thank you so much. Also a plug to speaking with us here, our gap year consultants. We are definitely our experts in this matter as well, in terms of consulting you on what program feels right for you. And on that note, Christian, I would love for you to close it out, maybe specifically for parents who are here tonight, and anything you could offer to them.
I mean, I know this is sort of a stressful and anxiety ridden time. But I also have the perspective of I was super lucky. I was super blessed. I went to a great school. So I graduated from Harvard, and I have now worked for 35 years. I have worked in multiple industries, and I have only worked with another person from Harvard like twice in my entire career. Like, meaning that sort of I am surrounded by CEOs and executive vice presidents and people that have powered amazing careers, and none of them have gone to these schools that we all spend all of our time talking about. So just to say, like, there are amazing, wonderful institutions out there that, like, in hindsight, as I travel the country and see just like how incredible these schools are. I was at Colorado State University last week. It's an amazing school. I was at UNC Charlotte. Beautiful, like hilly and gorgeous. All the buildings are brand new. It was just amazing. UMass is phenomenal. Everybody's like super happy and like having an amazing time. And so the school choices out there are great, are amazing. So I wouldn't correlate this decision with a drive to get yourself into Duke. I think, I don't mean to say that, Kimmy, is like, don't get into Duke, but I mean, I say, like, focus on the learning that you will get out of this moment in time. I think, like Cammy said, you don't graduate from college and get 6 months to go back to Europe in the middle of your career. Like, it doesn't happen that way. So I think grabbing these moments, and I wish I had done it myself, this moment of time is pretty precious. It just doesn't show up again. And I think parents, you would agree. I don't know, maybe you've had different experiences than my own. It's rare that you get another 6 months that show up that you can sort of break off and do this amount of in-depth learning about yourself that is just, powers the rest of our lives. Like, we all just want lives of fulfillment and positive impact for our sons and daughters. And And this is a really sort of predictable and magical way to get it. So, I hope you sort of talk to your kids tonight and reflect on that, because I know there's a certain amount of bravery that's definitely required to break off that conveyor belt. Like that's a real thing that I understand. And but we're all here to help answer any questions. If you have any, or sort of ever want to talk further, there's lots of perspective and opinions for sure, but we're here to support the growth of all the high school students on the call, and have dedicated our careers to it, all three of us. So super excited that you're here.
Christian, Camey, thank you both so much for your time speaking with all of us here this evening. I think this was great. I can't wait to even send this out to people who weren't able to make this. I think this will live in our system for quite a while. So again, thank you for your time, and looking forward to continued conversations.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, take care now.